What did sealed court documents reveal about the Jeffrey Epstein case? In July 2019, a federal appeals court ordered the unsealing of nearly 2,000 pages of documents related to a 2015 defamation case brought by Virginia Jeffrey, who was alleged that as a minor, she was trafficked by Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell to powerful men. The documents include depositions, police reports, flight logs, and even a memoir written by one of Epstein's accusers. Together, they provide disturbing details about what records describe as Epstein's alleged sex trafficking operation and those who reportedly took part in it. But the unsealed files also raise troubling systemic questions. How was Epstein able to avoid serious legal consequences for so long, despite numerous abuse allegations dating back to the 1990s? What do the blacked out passages and redactions throughout the documents conceal? And why did the institutions surrounding Epstein, from boarding schools to investment banks to the justice system itself, seem to protect him again and again? Court records show that Epstein was first accused of sexually abusing minors in 2005, when a 14-year-old girl and her parents claimed that Epstein had molested her at his Palm Beach mansion. The girl said she had been recruited by a female classmate to give Epstein massages for $200. In a sworn statement included in the newly released files, she described escalating abuse that culminated in forced intercourse with Epstein. Police reports say Epstein's behavior was an open secret among local high school girls, many of whom were from disadvantaged backgrounds. Court filings allege Epstein exploited their need for money and their fear of his wealth and influence. Yet in 2008, despite evidence that suggested an extensive pattern of abuse, Epstein managed to avoid serious prison time after drawn-out negotiations between his powerhouse legal team and federal prosecutors. He pleaded guilty to just 2 state prostitution charges in Florida and served only 13 months in jail, much of it on lenient work release. The newly unsealed documents offer clues into how Epstein was able to secure such a favorable outcome. They reference his political connections, allege efforts by his associates to discredit and intimidate accusers, and show legal agreements that shielded alleged co-conspirators from prosecution. But the files also contain extensive redactions that obscure key details. Whole pages are blacked out. Names of the rich and powerful are concealed. The documents allude to sealed settlement agreements, anonymous John Does who fought to keep files secret, and even classified information that was withheld. In 2019, shortly after the document release was ordered, and before he could face trial on new sex trafficking charges, Epstein was found dead in his Manhattan jail cell. His death was ruled a suicide. With the criminal case against Epstein over, many assumed the full truth would never be known. But the unsealed files have cracked open a window into Epstein's world and revealed glimpses of something even more unsettling. Not just one man's crimes, but a system that enabled him. The real story, it seems, it goes beyond Epstein, is about power, privilege, and the institutional frameworks that allowed him to operate unchecked for so long. So now the disturbing question is not just what Epstein did, is how he got away with it and who else was involved. Do you want to know the truth behind the Epstein case? The darkest, most shocking secrets that the powerful don't want you to know? Then you need to follow this channel right now. Click the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell, because what we're about to reveal will shake the very foundations of power, and you can't miss a single detail. Prepare yourself for a journey into the depths of depravity and corruption, and join us in this fight for justice. Subscribe now. The Unsealed Epstein files reveal more than just the lurid details of one man's alleged crimes. They expose a deeply troubling ecosystem of power and privilege that allowed him to operate unchecked for years, if not decades. At the heart of this system was Epstein's vast wealth, estimated at over $500 million. The documents show how he wielded this fortune to build a sprawling network of influence that stretched from Wall Street to the White House, from academia to the art world. Epstein's financial ties, laid out in court exhibits and bank records, connected him to some of the most prominent institutions and individuals in the world. He counted billionaires, celebrities, politicians, and even royalty among his associates. His investment firm, shrouded in secrecy, managed money for an exclusive clientele that reportedly included Leslie Wexner, the retail magnate behind Victoria's Secret. But Epstein's influence didn't just come from the company he kept. It was also a product of his carefully cultivated philanthropy and intellectual pursuits. The files reveal the staggering scope of his donations to prestigious universities like Harvard and MIT, where he sat on advisory boards and funded cutting-edge scientific research. These academic ties lent Epstein credibility and social capital. They allowed him to surround himself with an aura of brilliance and respectability, even as accusations of sexual abuse swirled around him for years. Perhaps most disturbingly, the documents suggest that this network didn't just turn a blind eye to Epstein's alleged crimes. In some cases, it actively enabled and participated in them. Witness statements and police reports paint a shocking picture of a sex trafficking operation that ran on an industrial scale, with recruiters, schedulers, and even a dedicated Maserati-driving employee to shuttle underage girls to Epstein's Palm Beach mansion. At the center of it all, according to multiple accounts, was Ghislaine Maxwell. The British socialite is described in the files as Epstein's chief enabler and co-conspirator. The accusers allege that Maxwell didn't just procure and groom young girls for Epstein, but participated in the sexual abuse herself. One plaintiff claimed Maxwell sexually assaulted her on a regular basis, an allegation Maxwell has denied. Yet despite these serious accusations, Maxwell faced no criminal charges for years. She moved freely in high society, continuing to associate with the global elite even after Epstein's 2008 conviction. The question of why Maxwell was protected and by whom is one of the central mysteries the unsealed documents raise but do not fully answer. What the files do make clear is that Epstein's legal reckoning was repeatedly stymied and softened by the same network of influence that enabled his crimes. Nowhere is this more apparent than in the controversial 2007 plea deal that allowed him to escape federal prosecution. The agreement, pilloried as shockingly lenient, was negotiated in unusual secrecy by a team of all-star defense lawyers with deep ties to the political establishment. It was approved by then U.S. Attorney Alex Acosta, who went on to serve as Labor Secretary under President Trump. And it included an extraordinary provision that granted immunity to any potential co-conspirators, a blanket protection that seemed to ensure Epstein's secrets would stay buried. Even after the deal was exposed by dogged investigative reporting, the system continued to shield Epstein. Powerful institutions kept welcoming him back into the fold. His checks kept clearing, his planes kept flying, and his social calendar remained full until his arrest on new federal charges in 2019 finally brought his house of cards tumbling down. But even in death, Epstein's protective cocoon held firm. He died by apparent suicide in a Manhattan jail cell, under circumstances that birthed 1,000 conspiracy theories, but little concrete accountability. The mysteries he took to his grave, the full extent of his crimes, the true nature of his power, the identities of those who aided and abetted him, remain frustratingly out of reach. And so the Epstein files, in the end, are not just an indictment of one twisted man. They are an indictment of the twisted systems and structures that bent again and again to protect him, and that are still with us today. What other predators are shielded by the same mechanisms of wealth, power, and privilege? What other victims have been silenced by the same conspiracy of complicity and willful blindness? These are the questions the Epstein saga leaves us to grapple with long after the headlines fade. Are you shocked by what we've uncovered so far? Well, that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more to come, more powerful names, more sinister schemes, more silenced victims. If you want to be on the front lines of this investigation, you need to subscribe to this channel now. Leave your comment below and tell us what you think. Your voice is crucial in this fight. The more we unite, the stronger our call for accountability will be. So subscribe, comment, and share. The truth depends on it. The justice system is supposed to be a great leveler. In theory, no one is above the law. Not the wealthy, not the powerful, not the well-connected. But the Jeffrey Epstein case exposes the gaping cracks in that foundational principle. The unsealed documents paint a disturbing picture of a legal system that bent and contorted itself to accommodate a man of enormous privilege, even as it failed to protect the vulnerable girls he victimized. Nowhere is this warped dynamic clearer than in the 2007 plea deal that allowed Epstein to escape serious consequences for his alleged crimes. The agreement, known as a non-prosecution agreement, or NPA, it was negotiated in extraordinary secrecy by a team of elite lawyers who had made the journey through the revolving door between government and private practice. Records show that Epstein's legal team included Alan Dershowitz, the Harvard law professor, and Kenneth Starr, the former independent counsel who investigated President Clinton. They used their deep connections and legal acumen to win concession after concession from prosecutors, who seemed to have been cowed by the sheer firepower arrayed against them. The resulting deal was unprecedented in its leniency. Despite ample evidence of a sprawling sex trafficking operation involving dozens of underage girls, Epstein was allowed to plead guilty to just 2 state charges of soliciting prostitution. He served a mere 13 months in a private wing of a county jail, with generous work release privileges that allowed him to spend up to 12 hours a day, 6 days a week at his plush office in Palm Beach. But perhaps the most extraordinary aspect of the NPA was its sweeping grant of immunity to any potential co-conspirators of Epstein's, a provision that seemed to ensure his crimes would never be fully investigated or prosecuted. The documents show that Epstein's lawyers lobbied hard for this clause, and that prosecutors ultimately acquiesced without even notifying the alleged victims. This is where the systemic rot becomes impossible to ignore, because the NPA didn't just give Epstein a slap on the wrist, it effectively shut down any further investigation into his network of enablers and associates. It granted blanket protection to a web of criminality that, according to the allegations in the unsealed documents, potentially involved the rich and powerful on multiple continents. And it did all this in defiance of the Federal Crime Victims' Rights Act, which requires prosecutors to notify and consult with victims before striking any plea bargain. The NPA was sealed and kept secret from Epstein's accusers, denying them their legal right to object or seek restitution. It's a stunning example of justice not just delayed or denied, but actively subverted. And it raises deeply troubling questions about the ability of our legal institutions to hold the privileged accountable when they stand accused of the most heinous crimes imaginable. How was Epstein able to assemble such a powerhouse defense team with connections reaching to the highest levels of government and academia? Why were prosecutors so intimidated or so compromised that they agreed to a deal that violated their most basic duties to victims and the public? What role did Epstein's wealth and political connections play in securing his astonishing lenient treatment? These are not abstract questions. They cut to the heart of whether we have a legal system that truly applies equal justice under law, or one that can be manipulated by the rich and powerful to escape accountability for even the most egregious crimes. And they take on new urgency in light of Epstein's untimely death in federal custody in 2019, which deprived his victims of their day in court and ensured that many of the secrets he carried would die with him. The circumstances of his apparent suicide, which occurred despite his being on suicide watch in one of the most secure jails in the country, have only deepened the sense of a system compromised at every turn by wealth and influence. In the final installment of this series, we'll grapple with the implications of the Epstein files for our notions of justice, equality, and the rule of law. We'll ask what reforms are needed to ensure that the powerful are held to account and that the vulnerable are protected. And we'll confront the hard truth that the rot exposed by this case goes much deeper than one tainted plea deal or one perverted predator. This is a story about power, about who wields it, who is shielded by it, and who is victimized by its abuse. It's a story that should make us all question the fairness and integrity of the systems that are supposed to protect us. But it's also a call to action, to demand more transparency, more accountability, and a true reckoning with the ways in which our institutions have failed the most vulnerable among us. Stay tuned for the final chapter in this exclusive investigation. And in the meantime, share your thoughts on what justice looks like in a system skewed by privilege and influence. The Jeffrey Epstein case is a window into a world most of us would prefer not to see. A world where wealth and power can bend the law to their will, where influence and connections can shield even the most heinous crimes from consequence, where the vulnerable are silenced and exploited, while the privileged escape accountability. It's a world that feels deeply alien to our notions of justice and equality. And yet, as the unsealed documents make clear, it is very much the world we inhabit. The Epstein files are not just a catalog of one man's depravity. They are an indictment of the systems and structures that enabled that depravity to flourish unchecked for so long. They expose the rot at the heart of our institutions, the deference to power, the indifference to victims, the willingness to look the other way in the face of staggering evidence of wrongdoing. And they leave us with an unsettling question. How many other Jeffrey Epsteins are out there? How many other predators are shielded by the same mechanisms of wealth and privilege that protected Epstein for so long? How many other victims have been silenced by the same forces of intimidation and complicity? How deep does the rot go? These are not questions with easy answers, but they are questions we must confront if we are to have any hope of building a more just and equal society. Because the hard truth is that the Epstein case is not an aberration. It is a manifestation of a much deeper sickness in our culture, one that values power over justice, influence over accountability, and the protection of the privileged over the safety of the vulnerable. We see this sickness in the way our legal system so often fails victims of sexual violence, from the backlog of untested rape kits to the meager prosecution rates for even the most clear-cut cases of assault. We see it in the way powerful men in fields from politics to entertainment can weather allegation after allegation with their status and influence intact. We see it in the way the wealthy and connected can buy their way out of consequences that would destroy the lives of the less fortunate. The Epstein case lays bare these inequities in stark and disturbing detail. It shows us a legal system that bent over backwards to accommodate a wealthy and well-connected predator, even as it ignored and belittled the girls he victimized. It shows us a social and political elite that continued to welcome Epstein into its ranks, even after his crimes were known, valuing his money and his access over any sense of moral accountability. And it shows us a media and public discourse that for too long looked the other way, treating Epstein's alleged crimes as salacious gossip rather than serious wrongdoing, and dismissing his victims as disposable inconveniences. These are the structures and attitudes that allowed Epstein to operate with impunity for so long. And they are still very much with us today. Dismantling them will not be easy. It will require a deep and honest reckoning with the ways in which power and privilege warp our institutions and corrupt our values. It will require us to elevate the voices of victims and survivors, even when those voices threaten the status quo. And it will require a sustained commitment to transparency, accountability, and equal justice under law. But if the Epstein files teach us anything, it is the urgent necessity of this work, because the alternative is a world where predators can operate with impunity, where the vulnerable are silenced and abandoned, and where the powerful can commit the most egregious abuses without fear of consequence. That is not a world any of us should be willing to accept. So let the Epstein case be a call to action, a demand for real and lasting change. Let it spur us to question the systems and structures that enable abuse, and to imagine new ones grounded in true accountability and justice. And let it remind us always of the human cost of looking the other way. The lives shattered, the futures derailed, the voices silenced by our collective failure to confront uncomfortable truths. The Epstein files have shown us the depths of that failure. Now it is up to all of us to ensure we do not repeat it. This is where the work begins. You've made it this far. You've seen how deep the rabbit hole goes, how vast the webs of complicity are. Now you have a choice. You can turn your back and pretend none of this happened, or you can join us. Subscribe to this channel, hit the like button, leave your comment, and most importantly, share this video. Because the only way to defeat the darkness is to bring it into the light. The more people see, the harder it will be for the predators to hide. Together, we can build an unstoppable movement for justice. But it starts with you, with your voice, your dedication, your click on that subscribe button. Let's make this echo in the halls of power. Let's shake the foundations of the mighty. Let's show the entire world what truth can do, but only if you join us now. Subscribe, act, and let's change history together.